Hello and welcome to Gone Fishing, a podcast from the North East Business Resilience Centre, aka the NEBRC, focusing on all things cyber and fraud related. Our aim is to help raise awareness and understanding amongst business audiences, supporting them to be better prepared and protected from the growing issue of cybercrime and fraud. I'm Rebecca Chapman, Director of the NEBRC and a Superintendent at South Yorkshire Police, with 30 years policing experience across uniform and CID. Today I'm very honoured to be speaking to Tony Sales, co-founder of We Fight Fraud, and Dr. Nicola Harding. The We Fight Fraud organisation is an organisation set up with a deep understanding of how criminals think and a shared passion for the fight against fraud and financial crime. Dr. Nicola Harding is Director of the Centre of Crime for Law and Justice at Lancaster University, and Nicola works at We Fight Fraud with Tony amongst many other projects. Tony, it's really great to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us. Just to update the listeners, some of us were lucky enough to see you speak at our annual event last year. It's fair to say that your story leading to the position that you're in today is utterly fascinating. And in fact, you've written a book about it, haven't you?
I have indeed, yeah. Thanks for having me, and thanks for having me just at your Christmas do there. It was good. So many important people in the room, and that way you can kind of get things done. So it was really good to see, and everyone kind of using all the resources that you use. I thought was amazing, to be honest. So it was an honour to be there myself. So thank you.
You're welcome. We really wanted to be able to share your story and the messages from it with our sort of wider stakeholders. So really grateful that you've come back and you're being part of our very first Gone Fishing podcast series. So maybe you could start by telling us a bit about how you got into the world of crime and your experiences of this.
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, at 7 years old, my uncle lowers me into a pub to go and open the door. I'm kind of the smallest out of the group, and so I fit through the gap nicely. And that kind of then leads me into a world of crime already. You know, my mum and dad have kind of left very early on in my life that creates a need in me forevermore that I'm always going to crave stuff, right? And I'm brought up by my grandparents. They can't afford the types of clothes that all the other kids my age are wearing. And that, you know, it leads to a lot of problems mentally, really, within me, of insecurities and, you know, things going on in my mind that as a kid you don't understand. And I just wanted to be different. I just wanted to get out of that zone. I wanted to make money, and I believed that money would take me to somewhere different. It didn't in the end. You know, it took me to a place like where all criminals go, and that ends up in prison. So, you know, like I often say, there's no glamour to crime, and I've lived it. I've experienced it my whole life until I changed it all round. You know, like I know what that life's about from the way that kids are now. I've been immersed in it for so long. So when you realise how much rubbish it is and just, you know, a dreadful environment, and that's what creates criminals, you know, the state of humanity in the way that we have children. You know, my mum and dad really are the creators of what goes on, because they're not able to take care of me as a kid. It's something that in adulthood I would make sure that I'm continuously there for my kids. Like I need to be in their life. It's actually, you know, finding out, you know, how I'm pushing my trauma onto my own kid changes me as a person, because I realised for the first time that, wow, this is a circle, you know, like of trauma just creating crime. And the crime, it's fitting what I've done. I just wanted to be someone different, right? So if you look at all the crimes I committed, it's identity theft. It goes hand in hand. Like, there's violent streaks that come out. There's a whole understanding of all of this stuff. And then meeting my business partner today, Adam Boom, who totally flipped the whole thing on his head and made me look at things from a different perspective. And then understanding it for other criminals, you know, making them change, making them see things within themselves that they didn't think, yeah, and seeing the impact that has, thanks to Nicola. You know, we're an amazing team that come together and can achieve amazing things just by making people understand what the problems are, because no one's even thought about those problems. You know, if you're, I remember having a conversation with Andy, who I said, well, you know, how many kids that come through the police system have got the same sort of problems I have? He says, all of them. Yeah. So he says, it's mundane. You see it so much that where's the differences? Yeah. I said, but surely therein lies the problem. Like, if we are seeing these kids come through, and you know, cyber's very different because it comes from a different class of people as well. Not poverty-stricken kids don't really often get involved in cyber unless it's the back end of it, maybe the money mule inside, or, you know, getting involved in a little bit of fraud or becoming an ID mule or something like that, that they can open up a bank account for a criminal network that's going to be away from them and offline. They come from different perspectives. So crime's evolving in a way that I predicted, because it's so obvious that when it's online, it breeds to others that don't have money, that want to have the nice coats, the nice bits and pieces that they need. And it all comes from that exact same standpoint as what I did as a kid. Just back then, it was much more physical. You could go into the shops, the shops existed, you know, that kind of stuff.
Why do you think you picked fraud rather than, I don't know, burglary or anything else?
I think because it just came naturally to lie to me. I wanted to be someone else, right? So every time I could go, it starts with sponsorship forms. You know, after the pub incident, I go to door with sponsorship forms, and we're just seeing the reactions of other humans. Oh, you're doing a really good thing, kind of drives you even more, and you're feeling like it's weird. You're feeling like a love, I suppose, from the people that you're getting, and that becomes more than the money. For me, that was more, you know, having these personas that could experience these feelings from other people of goodness. Like, in my own environment, I'm rubbish, right? But as someone else, I can get different emotions, and that probably drove me a lot more. And so that naturally leads into being someone else in adulthood. You know, meeting as you go through life, meeting girls and having relationships. You know, I'm probably lying in all the relationships I have as a young man, because I'm not emotionally matured enough to face the demons that I've got myself. You know, that doesn't happen till much later in life, and only as I'm going through all this stuff, I'm just getting better at explaining it, because I think it's really important for the others out there to understand, because I'm sure that they've all got the same emotions that I would have, and I'm just in a really lucky position to have an Andy, to have an Adam, and to have a Nicola that I can ask these questions of and get honest answers, you know, and then we can move forward.
So at one point, I think you were given the title Britain's Greatest Fraudster. I think that was a Sun newspaper that gave you that. Same with you. You'd done internet fraud, enabling you to steal nearly 30 million quid. And obviously you've written the book, The Big Con. Just give us some insight into kind of how you developed from a kind of low-level fraud into more organised crime and high level.
The systems are always the same, right? So when the financial system comes in 1974, you know, we get the Credit Act. Yeah, once the Credit Act comes in, it's inevitable what's going to happen. You know, that the more debt there is, the more money that gets made, the more in society we can drive wages, we can drive all these things that matter, right? And so we need to have that financial system working in that way. I just tapped into it, and with each crime that I did, I understood more about identity. You know, I actually had this conversation yesterday with someone, yeah, where I said that, you know, the internet's no different. It's just all identity. Every single thing is identity. Well, then I'm a master in it, yeah, because I've been doing this thing since a child, and it doesn't matter. There are no new scams at all. Everything is an old scam with a new spin. So as I go through my criminal career, I obviously learn that, £10,000 triggers that. Okay, if I do 1,500 quid there, that triggers that. If I stay underneath that, that won't trigger. If I cover the work details, the home address, if I've got the mail diverted, if I've got access to a bank account, all these things are tick, 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 tick. If I can get access to an Experian credit account now before, or Equifax or Cool Credit or TransUnion, or whoever it may be, these all become build-ups in a picture of information that I'm going to utilize. And it doesn't matter the size of the scam then, right? Whether I'm going for a TV that's 3,000 or a mortgage that's 300,000, they're both the exact same thing if I've got all the right information. And understanding that going through, I was able to organised crime gets involved in stuff. Yeah, so like within the organised, you'll know this well, Becky. Yeah, within the organised crime world, criminals loan stuff out to other criminals to get their wares back. Yeah, they make more money by, selling drugs or whatever it is, and sometimes those people run away. They steal things from those criminals, and in the past people would be killed for that. And then I fell in with a crime group that I kind of changed that whole perspective and said, well, hold on a minute, like maybe there's a different way to get the money back from these guys, and I figured out different ways of getting the money back by utilizing their ID and making them do stuff that's now because their life before, you've upset some really dangerous people, and they're playing in a world where stuff like that is going to happen. So, those sort of things. And then once you're immersed in organised crime, things come to those people at a level like never before. Before you know it, you've got a mortgage broker. Before you know it, you've got a car dealer. You've got 10 people working in banks. You can do transfers. You can do account takeovers. Like account takeovers were an everyday thing because everyone was doing them, and now it's just all moved online. So there's no difference in the processes. We're still all looking for mother's maiden name, my favourite pet, like your date of birth. All the time we are using these stupid questions, that everyone can get hold of. We're in trouble, and we need to start thinking like that. It's got to go past passwords very soon.
So, and you mentioned all of this. Was it really that easy?
Yeah, it still is. The terrifying thing is, it's still as easy. Now, in today's world, I get to test this stuff with ethics in the background to show, look, guys, this is the problem. Yes, the problem still existing. While you're all thinking A, the criminal's thinking B, C, D, F, G, H, I, J, and then miles down the road. And Nicola allows that to happen in that way. She kind of can understand the stuff. I mean, the first time I ever took Nicola, I'll let her tell you, but I took Nicola on a test with me for the first time, and she kind of saw a change in me. And only if you're a criminal will you understand that. Most criminals, before they're going to commit a crime, have a poo. Yeah, they can't help it because their adrenaline is, they just can't help it. It's the change. Yeah, it happens. Bang. Now you're in the zone. Yeah, and once that happens, like, you can't stop it. Yeah, like, you're in the zone. The opportunity is there, and you're going to take it. And that nowadays, having a doctor explore that with you when that's actually happening can be so beneficial to police forces, governments, businesses everywhere around the world to understand those sort of things.
So, Nicola, just kind of bringing you in there. So Tony mentions obviously his childhood, and you're obviously doing a lot of research into the mindset of a criminal and a fraudster. Do you think sort of family intervention is the way forward for this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's it's not just family intervention, it's societal intervention. If we want to really stop fraud, we have to completely change society, because it's set up at the moment to create fraudsters. It is currently, right from birth, really, social services, the welfare state, everything is set up. The conditions are just, a breeding ground for people. I think you asked a crucial question before. Okay, you're into crime, but why not burglary? Why fraud? And I think that when we have children growing up in these conditions, obviously Tony was 7. He did do burglary first. It was his first thing with a wider group because of his physicality. He was small, right? The difference that happened in Tony's scenario is he's clever. So he's clever and he sees patterns and he's able to see the predictability, and a lot of that comes from, like, I hope you don't mind me talking about you like this, Tony, but a lot of that comes from his childhood trauma. When you've been through that trauma, you have to be able to identify patterns. It's a matter of life or death. You are sensing the tension in the room when people walk in, when there's violence. These kids become highly attuned to other people because they're walking on eggshells from before they could walk. So they kind of become so highly attuned to the behaviours of other people. And when you understand the behaviours of other people and the predictability of people and the predictability of systems, when you start to kind of go, okay, so now I understand that. No one's caring for me. No one's looking for me. This is life or death. I've got to look after myself. How am I going to do it? Okay, I'm going to manipulate those behaviours and systems. And so it absolutely, you know, if you took Tony and put him into an affluent family with 2 parents who were at home, you know, no domestic violence, all these types of things, if he was given the opportunities that we assume every child in the country should have or have a right to, you know, he wouldn't be sat here as Britain's greatest fraudster. He'd probably be working in government or something similar. You know, his life course would be very, very different. And so we need to think about the life chances that we give, you know, all our children, and not make assumptions about what family life is like and what interventions should we put in place. You know, I'm not saying that social services should be removing children or anything like that. What I'm saying is that we need to think about the most marginalised in society and realise that that's not, you know, it's more people than what we think. And if we don't create better opportunities for people, they're going to go after the criminal opportunity because they've got to survive. And for youngsters coming from backgrounds like that, it's a matter of life or death. It's self-survival because they haven't got, you know, those people creating that kind of padding and safety net for them. They've got to create their own safety net, and that's how youngsters, particularly from deprived backgrounds, get into organised crime, because that becomes their safety net.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same across sort of other genres, isn't it? Like cybercrime and counter-terrorism. You know, and that's why the PREVENT programme with the police do is so important. Just tell us a bit about the organisation We Fight Fraud, and how does your research fit into that, Nicola?
So We Fight Fraud just intrigues me. It intrigued me from the moment I met Andy and Tony. So just a bit of backstory. I met Adam and Tony at the party of a mafia princess who lives up here in Lancashire. And my expertise actually is lived experience. How do we take people's lived experience who've been through the criminal justice system, who've committed crime? How do we take that and make it something useful and make it meaningful, not just, you know, consultation or whatnot? So I met Adam first, who's the nicest human being you've ever met in your life. And he said, "Oh, you must meet my business partner, Tony." And Tony will tell you, if my eyes could have rolled any further back in my head, they would have, because I'm used to having approaches of former criminals who think they're all this, and I've got no interest in hearing criminal war stories. Like, I don't want to relive the glories of the past. I want to know what you're doing now. And so we kind of, you know, he told me, and he was like, just go away and check us out, do your research type thing. And I did. And they started just after we first met, we went into lockdown, and they put on an annual conference, We Fight Fraud Live, and did it online. And I actually got ethical approval, and I watched that as a research project because I wanted to understand, okay, you've got a former police chief, former hacker, and a former fraudster. Like, what are they going to do? Like, blow me away, basically. And it did, because what I realised is, particularly working with Tony, is that in criminology we have lots of theories about crime, and I realised I already knew that criminologists don't really know what they think they know. The same with most academics, because they separate the real world from the academic world. And I'm all about reality. Like, if it's not real, I'm not interested. We don't want to deal in fairy tales. We want to deal in truth, because that's what we can actually use to change policy or change practice. And what I got at that first We Fight Fraud Live was a whole dose of the truth. And so I just wanted to kind of work with them more and they've adopted me now, but I do feel I've kind of bullied myself in of like, well, if we did this research project, and between Tony and I, we came up with the Rapid Response to Fraud and Financial Crime, which is where, as Tony said earlier, he showed me, because all of this time I'm just hearing what he's saying and hearing what the team are saying, this really unique kind of fraud prevention. They go in and do testing on firms, break into banks and show them how they could steal all their money and all this. It all sounds really exciting, but I just heard about it. And seemingly I passed enough of Tony's tests for him to show me. So we went to Liverpool, we did the testing, and I picked a building that used to house a governmental department, and I thought it didn't anymore. So I thought this would be a good test case because it was safe enough, like, go and have a look. And we went and had a look one night, and he kind of was talking, telling me, oh, well, it's about the lighting, it's about this, it's about that, that kind of loads of things. And as we're walking around the corner, I talk like this. And I notice I'm talking for a long time and he's no longer listening. He's gone. So I think, oh God, I better shut up. Something's about to happen. And so I just noticed a woman walks past us that way. And I thought, there's something that's triggered something. So I'm just watching him at this point and realise his face had changed, his eyes had changed, and I was no longer there to him. So I crossed the road to go and have a look, and he just went, "What's the time?" And I was like, I think it was 6:05 or something like that. And he went, "Okay," and that was the last thing he said. So I crossed the road to just go and watch, and I just wish I could have had David Attenborough narrate it, because it was like watching a lion stalk its prey. And it was literally he took a couple of steps back and he was just stood there, and I'm like, what's he gonna do? And then he just went for the door, and as he went for the door, someone else came to the door, and it's like he'd timed it. It was like watching a ballet. Exactly. So that person then opened the door for him, but it was just a second off and he'd have been fooled. It would have been foiled and he wouldn't have got in, because they would have expected him to open the door. So I was like, oh, that was good, but there's another door inside. How's he going to get through that? So I'm I'd walked too far up the road. I couldn't see through the door, ran down the street, trying not to look like an idiot, because at this point I was pretending to be on my phone or something. Like I said, I do not have any of Tony's skills. So he's so undercover. I'm so the weird woman that's just wandering around the street. And I look up. I was like, where is he? Where's he gone? And the next thing I hear, bang, 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 and he's 2 flights of stairs up. And I was like, oh, you can actually do this, can't you? Amongst feeling like I was going to be sick, and can he please get out of the building as quick as possible? To which he did. And it was my first education into, oh, okay, so these aren't just things we talk about. These are things that are done. This is actual skills and expertise. It's not just about knowing how to shoulder surf or knowing how. Social engineering isn't about linguistics. It isn't about the things that you say. It's how you hold yourself. It's your body language. And it's having the guts to do something that no matter what, you know that a tiny slip up can get you caught. And what do you do then? But still go in for it with full confidence, as though you should absolutely be there. And it was at that point I realised, God, we've got so much to learn, and maybe Tony and the team can teach me. So we started doing these research projects once a year. We've done 2 of them now, where we do 72 hours in a city. We're given a task. The first year we looked at the return to work after COVID, and the second year we looked at how to onboard KYC into challenger banks, your new Neo app banks. So 2 very different projects, because it's about the social engineering, it's about the digital, it's the physical's almost kind of, just part of that. They don't really separate. So being able to get that research means that we've got insights now in academia to do with fraud and financial crime that we make publicly available to everyone. They're all written up within 28 days and anyone can download them, take those insights and kind of use them within their businesses and that. But that didn't exist before, and it doesn't exist anywhere else. Everything else that's written about fraud and financial crime comes from the data, or it comes from theory, because actually not very many people, nobody else apart from myself in academia, I haven't seen anyone else do it anywhere else. Usually if there's anyone doing kind of pen testing or whatnot, they stay behind that, non-disclosure agreements, and it's just for the company. So this is the kind of first of a kind type of research that combines testing with lived experience. It's research informed, it's evidence based, and it's lived experience driven. And so, it feels like something that could really change things, and that's what motivates me to be part of the team.
Yeah, I think that kind of research would really provide a mandate almost for police going forwards, won't it, to act upon evidence that's in the research world, rather than just trying to do what they think is right, almost.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, knowledge is, like everyone says, knowledge is power. I always say knowledge is armor, because when you know, you can protect yourselves. You know, we don't invest enough in prevention, and by doing these forms of research and testing, they're the best ways to protect yourself. You know, you would want to know where the holes are, wouldn't you, so that you can plug them. You know, and with cybercrime, and now it looks like fraud becoming seen as the most recent threats to national security, is something we all need to be concerned about. It's not just a police problem anymore. So kind of having as much knowledge as possible, and then how do you action that? You know, it's exciting, obviously, as an academic. It's a new form of knowledge. This is kind of like paradigm shifting stuff, really, which sounds quite grand, but we need it. We need it in cybercrime. We need it in fraud and financial crime, because we are so on the back foot that we can't do things the way we've always done things, because we're just going to get the same results. The biggest thing we can do is underestimate our adversary. Like I said, Tony's clever, fraudsters are clever, criminals are clever. They're not stupid. The ones that are stupid are the ones that get caught and kind of, you know, in ridiculous ways that we find out about. The ones that are clever, we don't even know who they are. They're just out there doing it, you know. So we can't ever underestimate, and we can't underestimate the value of this form of knowledge, because whether we like it or not, you know, some people may not want to work with former criminals, or may not really value what we do. But whether we like that or not, this is the future, because if it isn't, then things are going to go very badly from here on out.
Yeah, I suppose in my 30 years in the police, I've often found that the best detectives are the ones that have the most kind of informants, or listen the most to the criminals, because then they find out how things got done. You know, and then they can almost stay one stage ahead. So Tony, coming back to you, what made you want to change and shine a light on these activities, and how did you come to set up We Fight Fraud?
Well, I guess that so the change happens in two ways, right? So there's a police officer who tells me that an identity that I've stolen is from a dead person. That's the first realisation that there's people that are linked to what I'm doing. Up until that point, every ID, every name is just a name on a screen or a name on a book that I then make identification to with either me or my mate's face on, right? So I only ever get them like that until she awakens me. And then when I'm finally caught and I'm in prison, my wife comes to visit me, and when she comes on the visit, she's got my son, who was 7 or 8 then, and she's holding his hand, and she walks in and he's just crying, and I'm like, what's wrong with him? She says, what do you think was wrong with him? Like, you're in prison again, you idiot. And it's that kind of, I realised that, oh wow, I've pushed my trauma onto him now, and what I'm doing is now affecting the emotions of my own kid. So I actually go back to the wing that night and change. Like, I want to get involved in fraud prevention. I actually talk about it with a couple of people on the wing, which went down okay, I guess, but it was, it was wanting to understand. And then coming out of prison, I just kind of wanted to get involved in, how could I get involved in fraud prevention? I didn't even know what the words were. Yeah, I had to sit and Google and kind of go through things and go and like, I've always kind of known about business. Naturally, I've got a really sharp business brain. Yeah, hence why the fraud thing really worked well for me, because you have to have a good business brain to do that, right? And so I knew that those skills were transferable. I know I've got a drive. I'll be up first in the morning. I've always had that skill. I'll be last to go to bed at night, yeah, and still driving everyone when everyone's down. I'm still rallying everyone. That was an old skill I had. Could I transfer that over? And I just started going to just go and meet people at these free kind of a bit like, they're run by corporates. The first one I went to was run by Amex, yeah. And I just showed up and was just talking, and just got talking to one of the guys there who became a good friend, Alan Smith, who still works in loss prevention today, who kind of told me a bit more of where to go and look. And then I made a Vice documentary called How to Get Away with Stealing. Yeah, and that kind of elevated me up because it got like some mad amount of views very quickly, and people were kind of sharing it, and then it gets like legendary status without me even knowing it, because I'm not even thinking it, I'm just being me, yeah, and just showing them this kind of stuff. But it's the first time it's ever been done. No one's ever looked at fraud in that way before, and so, you know, that's in 2011, and then I use that to send to a conference. I go to the conference and decide that I'm going to get involved in loss prevention, and very quickly the conference picks me up. We have a chat. I say I'm going to do this physical pen testing thing. Like, look, if I was a criminal nowadays, I'd use a rubber ducky. Look, like, this thing's dangerous. Wow. I don't even know what it does, but I tell you, like, if I've got one, I know I'm going to be able to steal everyone's data and mess them up. Yeah, so should we try something? And then I got to test some huge brands straight away, and impact, bang, wow. Like, I didn't even see the data impact. It was actually one of the clients. So I showed back up with all their files. Yeah, like, I just went, I think this might be a problem. Yeah, and this is like in 24 hours. So we would do something in 24 hours to give them like a little wake up, yeah, of like, look, this is what we could do. And so when I kind of showed back up with that, he was just like, I never even saw it, and he said, wow, this is brand reputation. And that's when everything kind of synced in my head of, right, I need to think about a super team that will allow us to change how the narrative goes. We need to be able to show it. We need to be able to get it out there. And, you know, because it's not just to corporates every day. You know, I do a lot of speaking events for corporate events, right? And I always say at the events that, like, look, we're all here in our corporate capacity, but the reality is at some point throughout the day, we're all going to become consumers, right? So it's getting it to the other consumers that don't understand this stuff, that are not in our industry, and making them aware of the risks that they face just by holding their own information. Yeah. And so that's, you know, I've known that from back then. Like I said, identity theft for me is it within me. It's only the same thing online. I know it frontwards, backwards, better than all of the credit reference agencies. I mean, now I've told them things that happen in their processes that they didn't even know about. Yeah, because it's vulnerabilities that as a criminal you look for, that to utilize the stuff that you've got, you know, and that's what I'm all about, is showing that stuff. And so it was a natural progression eventually to get in. Andy for me really changed the game, you know, like having Andy on board is full on credibility, yeah, because that's the ex-head of fraud for the Metropolitan Police putting his arm round We Fight Fraud and saying, look, this really is something different, yeah. And that, you know, he enhanced, because he says, you know, he says it publicly, you know, he worked in the police for 30 years like you, Becky, and he says he can't think like me. He says no matter how he tries, you know, and he's seen it on testing. Like, we've been on tests for huge companies, yeah, and he's worried Sol's not been able to break, like, and I'm like, oh, don't worry about it, stop worrying everyone, you're all worrying, don't worry, I've got this. Like, and then because I'm already aware of the same vulnerability that exists in all of us, yeah? We're all too bloody nice. That's the problem, yeah? And someone like me is going to manipulate that and cause havoc, and that's what everyone needs to start understanding. And so now there's a natural need for We Fight Fraud. There's a natural desire for We Fight Fraud by lots of different people, but we always stay, we don't get corrupted by companies. You can't just give us money to shut up. You can't just slow us down in our processes of what we're doing, because we have a you know, the whole company, the wrongs that I did as a person, I will forevermore want to say sorry for. I will forevermore want to give that information out, because kids, old ladies, vulnerable people, all these people are still suffering today, yeah? And like, that's why I'm willing to stand up to it. And I've told you this before, Becky, I get death threats for it. All of this stuff happens, yeah? Like, it really, really happens, but I don't care. I accept it, and it is what it is, yeah? Like, anyone serious is not going to come and tell me anyway, so I won't know about the real ones.
Yeah, you see, it's a real insight from the other side, and one that you don't get very often. So I know there's a few people that do it. You work with one of them, don't you, Solomon? So yeah, ex-CAD hacker, you know, slightly different background to you, but similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, me and Sol are kind of like, we're soulmates, exactly, you know, like, we are really soulmates. And the first time we was actually put together by Cyfast, so the banks in the background knew that there was a natural desire to get us two together, yeah, and that was Mike Haley that done that, and we'll be forever thankful for him for doing that. But once we met, it was love at first sight for the pair of us, and we just have a natural thing together. I mean, you know, while I'm getting through the shoulder surfing in, Sol's hacking all of the CCTV to remove any stuff of me ever there, you know, and this is the other level that we go to. And so naturally we complement each other. And these are the problems that we're now seeing in society, is the hacker for hire that everyone needs to start worrying about, you know, especially with the old types of Tonys that there are out there in their abundance.
So, in terms of the future then for cybercrime and fraud, where do you think the biggest related threats are for business today?
In their people. You know, your show's called Gone Fishing, right? Herein lies the biggest problem in the world. Everyone's got an email address nowadays, yeah? Everyone, if you haven't been to Have I Been Pawned, you should go there. You know, these are basics in today's day and age to understand, has my information been compromised? Can someone get to my email address? Because these databases exist. When you go on a site, do you give your information away? These are all processes that come down to what the person that is doing it is us. We have to put our information out there somewhere for it to appear on some sort of list for someone to get to us. And then if that does happen, which to 99% of us, that's definitely happened, then when you do get an email, what is it you do? You know, like, what is it you are going to do? Now, are you going to walk up to a stranger in the street and tell them all your personal information? Are you going to tell them when you last slept with your spouse, partner? Are you going to tell them how your money troubles are troubling you, and you know what money you've got? Are you not going to do that? So but online, because there's a screen in front of us and we're behind tapping on the screen, we give this information away freely, and that is build-ups of stuff. So making people understand where they should go. So we don't have a non-click policy. We have a, you know, if you do your training with us, we would make sure that you click the link that comes through to you, yeah, that's asking for stuff, but we want you to understand what they're asking for. So, you know, we do a lot of phishing exercises where we get people to click through. We want them to input information, but we get like, not getting us this time. That's what we want, yeah, because on the first time we may have got them, you know, and in some of our tests we end up getting CEOs or CFOs or whoever it may be, because the phishing attacks can look so great nowadays, yeah. So, but we want to teach people of what they look like without fear. Yeah, don't be scared. That's the last thing we want. We want everyone to all be on the same page and understanding what it is we should be doing. I think that would be the best thing that we could say.
So if you had like sort of one key message to give to a business about their cybersecurity and their fraud prevention, what would it be?
It would be to make sure that you train your staff in how it all happens. Yeah, not just one tick box exercise, which is what all the regulators say, no tick boxing, right? You can do your tick box, but you have to go beyond that. Yeah, like, and that's what this is all about, is going beyond and understanding. Because if you understand as something happens, you know, your whole team become much stronger, because, you know, like, and if you can do it in an engaging way that allows your staff to really understand how important nowadays cybersecurity is, because for every company out there, you know, it has to be in the top 3 now. You know, if you're serious about business and you don't have serious cyber, then you're not going to be taken seriously, because you're only going to become a victim. And then that, because you become a victim, depreciates the value of that company. You know, like, how much stuff do you take seriously? We take our pride in ourselves of making sure that all of our processes are done, and making people understand what things mean when they click on things, not just everyone panicking. You know, what we hate is panic. So, you know, never panic, and understand what you're doing, and make your staff understand that exact same journey. And that's important.
So how do you think organisations such as us, the NABRC, how can we play a role in all of that?
I think you guys are a really great bridge. for all of, like, you've got access to, the processes that happen, the records of crimes that happen. You've got access to high level people within the bank. You've got access to people like We Fight Fraud. You've got access to all the agencies that matter, right? And all of it, the more you know about this stuff, the more you're going to understand, and by being part of you guys, being with you guys, that only adds value to any company out there that needs that, because you're giving people the right information and the right tools. You're not just going down, you're not driven by money by companies like us. So you want to actually give the right advice. That's really important.
I'd add to that as well to say that there's an awful lot of information out there now about fraud and financial crime, and not all of it is what you should be wanting to pass on to your staff. So to have an organisation like yourselves to curate, like, actually these are the things you need to know. Like, a business has enough on its plate without thinking, oh God, how do I navigate this fraud prevention kind of landscape? They need it kind of easy and delivered to them. We need to make this as easy for organisations as possible, and not confusing, and not feel like a barrage of kind of fraud influencers trying to get their bit in. Needs to be good, evidence-based, kind of, this is what you should do in our thing, and the latest threats as well. And I think you guys do that really, really well.
That's great, thanks. So that's been absolutely brilliant to talk to you both today. I could talk to you both for hours on end. It's a great subject to talk about, and Tony's experiences are second to none. But that's all we have time for today. So thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.